Hello there, and welcome to Brick Army. My name's Steve, and for today we are doing my speed build and review the USS Fletcher, the World War II variant. Instructions look okay. We are in groups with the bags, so 5 bags of group 1, 5 bags of group 2, etc, etc. Which, while not ideal, is better than nothing. Normally, and throughout the course of the speed build, I leave or show historical and observational information on the screen. But today I want to leave you something which will still come up during the course of the video. But I just want you to take into account the enormity of this. The Fletchers, 175 of them built. They were the most built of any one class of ship, warship, in the world ever. 175 of them. Japan's surface fleet at its height was 174 ships, and that includes their destroyers, cruisers, battleships, aircraft carriers, corvettes, various other different warships. Were outnumbered by one class of American destroyer. And in total, the Americans ran 15 different types of destroyer through the war. And whilst none of them were quite as big as the Fletchers, the Gearings still had 98 ships. The Summers, 58 ships. They had an incredible amount of ships, but this ship outnumbered the whole of the Japanese Navy. At one point, there was 3 or 4 of these coming out per week out of the shipyards in America. Per week. How scary is that? And leaves you with the question, Japan? Seriously? What were you thinking? Anyway, it's time to crack on and build. The USS Fletcher, DD-445, was named after Admiral Frank Friday Fletcher and was the lead destroyer of her class. She was laid down by the Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in Kearney, New Jersey on the 2nd of October 1941 and was launched on the 3rd of May 1942, sponsored by Mrs. F. Fletcher, widow of Admiral Fletcher. She was commissioned into the US Navy on the 30th of June 1942. General characteristics of the Fletcher-class destroyers were a displacement of 2,971 tons, a length of just over 114 metres, a beam of just over 12 metres, and a draft of just over 4 metres. Her maximum speed was 36 knots, although with some variations, some ships in the class could manage more. She had a range of 6,500 nautical miles, and a complement of 273 officers and enlisted men. Her armament consisted of 5 single 127mm dual-purpose guns, 10 533mm torpedo tubes, as well as an assortment of anti-aircraft guns and depth charges. After commissioning into the US Navy, the Fletcher was sent to the Guadalcanal campaign. Arriving in New Caledonia from the east coast of the United States on the 5th of October 1942, she at once began escort and patrol duty in the Guadalcanal operation, bombarding Lunga Point on the 30th of October. Sailing to Espiritu Santo on the 9th of November to cover the landing reinforcements on the island, she joined in driving off enemy air attacks on the transports, claiming several enemy aircraft shot down. This was the opening phase of the naval battle of Guadalcanal, a 3-day air and surface action, and the Fletcher played an important part in the surface action off of Guadalcanal on the 13th of November, firing her guns and torpedoes in the general melee, which sank 2 Japanese destroyers and damaged the fast battleship Hai, which was later sunk by carrier and marine aircraft. After the Battle of Guadalcanal had finished, she replenished and then sorted out again on the 30th of November 1942 with a force of cruisers and destroyers to intercept a force of enemy transports and destroyers expected to attempt reinforcement of Guadalcanal that night. The resulting Battle of Tassafaronga saw 1 Japanese destroyer sunk, 1 slightly damaged, and 4 American cruisers badly damaged, though all but 1 was saved by prompt damage control. The USS Fletcher also rescued survivors from the Northampton. The destroyer continued to operate in the Solomon Islands, patrolling, shelling shore targets, driving off Japanese air attacks, rescuing downed aviators, sinking Japanese landing barges, and covering new landings on the northern coast of Guadalcanal. Out on patrol on the 11th of February 1943, Fletcher was alerted by smoke dropped by a plane from the Elena and sped to attack the I-18. She supported the landings on the Russell Islands on the 21st of February and bombarded Munda Airport in New Georgia during the night of the 5th-6th of March. After 2 refits, 1 in Australia and 1 in the United States, she returned to provide air support for the invasion of the Gilbert Islands. After another refit in 1944, she was ready for the attack on the Marshall Islands. She screened a force of troop transports from San Diego to Lahaina Roads from the 13th to the 21st of January 1944, then joined a bombardment group to fire on Woija Atoll on the 30th of January. Next day, she rendezvoused with the main attack force for the landings on Kwajin, screening the transports and patrolling off the atoll until the 4th of February. Her main roles were anti-submarine warfare, air defense, troop transportation, and shore bombardment. By the end of April 1944, she was ready to support the Humboldt Bay landings, covering reinforcement landings on the 30th of April, then patrolling against submarines until late May, and then covered and provided shore bombardment for the invasions of Niuafo'ou, Sansepor, and Maratai, as well as patrolling and escorting reinforcements for these various operations through the summer. By October of 1944, she was ready to prepare to assist in the invasion of Leyte, and sorted out on the 12th of October, screening transports. On the 20th of October 1944, she was ordered to return to New Guinea, which unfortunately meant that she missed the Battle of Leyte Gulf and the destruction of the IGN battleship Yamato. Next, in January of 1945, she was tasked to provide cover for the Luzon attack force. As the war progressed, the Fletcher's focus shifted towards the Philippines. Participating in the liberation efforts, she provided crucial support for the landings at Lingang Gulf in January of 1945. Through the next 5 months of 1945, she participated in most of the major events of the Philippines' liberation. After the liberation of the Philippines, she returned to the United States for an overhaul and training, taken into reserve in January of 1947. The USS Fletcher was recommissioned on the 3rd of October 1949 as a specialist in anti-submarine warfare after a conversion to escort destroyer, DDE 445, and sailed on the 1st of May 1950 for a tour with the 7th Fleet in the Western Pacific. Based in Hong Kong at the start of the Korean War, she supported the 7th Fleet in its operations around the Korean Peninsula through the summer and autumn of 1950. She also participated in the Battle of Incheon between 13th to 17th of September, then returning to Pearl Harbor, her home port, on the 11th of November. After another refit, she returned to the 7th Fleet in November of 1951, actively participating in the Korean War again, with shore bombardment, anti-submarine warfare, as well as patrolling the Taiwan Straits. She continued for another 2 tours with the 7th Fleet for the duration of the Korean War. From 1954 to 1962, Fletcher continued to support the 7th Fleet in the Far East, notably providing anti-submarine screening for the evacuation of the Taishan Islands. The USS Fletcher was finally decommissioned and stricken from the Naval Vessel Register on the 1st of August 1969 and sold for scrap on the 22nd of February 1972. The Fletchers are probably the best remembered destroyers of the US Navy during the Second World War, not only by the numbers, but because they embodied the United States industrial might in wartime, and also because they arrived soon enough to make a difference in the Pacific, with significant combat history. These ships, also named tin cans, due to their lack of protection compared to the big boy cruisers and battleships, provided by their numbers and quantities invaluable service and missions to the United States Navy from 1942 to 1945. Stable, they would be armed notably with an impressively heavy anti-aircraft armament by the end of their career, giving their class providing a wall of fire to their escort, while not compromising on their anti-submarine warfare capabilities nor anti-ship capabilities. After World War II, 53 Fletchers were sold or given to 14 countries, with their last ships not withdrawn until the 2000s. Although the USS Fletcher is now gone, there are several examples of Fletcher-class destroyers around the world. USS Kidd 661 is in Louisiana Veterans Museum in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. USS The Sullivans 537 is at Naval Park Buffalo in New York State. USS Cassin Young 793 is at the National Historical Park in Boston, Massachusetts. And finally, the last one is the former USS Chariot 581, renamed the Velos, in Thessalonica in Greece. And this is the only one that retains its original World War II configuration. So welcome back, and here we go, the USS Fletcher, DD445. So this review is coming from somebody who's never done a brick ship before. This is my first time, and I've got to say, this was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. The build itself was relatively simple. I have to point out, these instructions are fantastic. These are by far some of the best instructions that I've come across. Yes, they are essentially bits of paper that are stapled together. They're not a book like the Sembo stuff, but these really are very good indeed. So, a couple of things that you may not be aware of if you skip through the build and went straight to the review. Torpedo tubes do move, the turrets do move, and the guns do elevate, although they're a little stiff. And if I'm being really picky, I would have liked to have seen the gun barrels slightly longer, slightly more realistic. They're a little stubby, but they do work. The only other grump that I have about this, and this is not just this model, this is a lot of models, the things that actually move, the things that people will play with, like the turrets, they will move them and they will move the guns, and yet they seem to be mounted in the not the worst possible way. But something like these funnels are rock solid. They're not going to move. So why not do the same with the turrets? And this isn't just on ships. It applies to tanks, it applies to helicopters, it applies to planes as well. Could they be mounted a little better? I feel they could be. So, for instance, this turret here, why can't that be a 4-node in this position here? Why couldn't we have put a 2x2 on top of this if you couldn't fit something else in? Or even put two 2x1s in there, and then that would have held this turret far more securely, meaning that when you move it, it's far more likely to stay on, and you're not going to be pulling, trying to find the nodes to put it back on it. But that's just a general thing. It's not specific necessarily just to this. It applies to an awful lot of models. Underneath, we have, there's down there in the way, but we have some wheels and a nice little touch. They do move the propellers. So this does come with a stand that you build, and also a rather amusing little plate, which, let's see if I can get that close to the camera. So it has, if you couldn't see that, it has the code for the model on there. That's absolutely fine. And then it reads armoured ship, maximum speed 37 nm, competence super durable. They're advertising it on the box as USS Fletcher. Why just not put USS Fletcher there? Doesn't make any sense to me. But in all other respects, Panlos, good job here. I paid £42.93 for this, which in comparison to a lot of the other ships is pretty good value. Certainly there are an awful lot of Bismarcks and Ohios around that vary between around £50 sterling up to 200. So yes, it's a smaller model than something like that, but it's pretty good. I'm quite happy with this. It was quite a stress-free build, let's put it that way. Very enjoyable to do. About the length of time that I was expecting to do it in, which was about 6-7 hours. So, can I recommend the Panlos USS Fletcher? Yes, I can, definitely. And also, one thing I wanted to point out is I did search around quite a few of the companies, and as I mentioned, a lot of companies do Bismarcks, Ohios, etc., etc. This was the only Fletcher that I could find, and certainly the only World War II American destroyer. So if that is your interest, you don't have a great deal of choice, but there is at least one of them out there. And as I said at the start of the video, the Fletcher, the most mass-produced warship in the world ever, and definitely deserves a place of honour in your collection. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe. Feel free in the comments to put down anything that you want there, especially if you've got a request for any models to be built, and we'll see what we can do about that. So, lovely to see you again. You take care. Bye bye.